you saying, huh? What you saying,
What is going on, everybody? How do you like that old-fashioned intro? That I got to get a new one. But hey, what's up? I'm here with Alex from Hedron.pro. Really exciting new PulseChain product. It's going to be launching soon. Before we go any farther and before anyone gets too triggered in the chat, I just want to say that one of the reasons I love this product is because it is admin key free and double audited. And those audits, I believe, are scheduled to release one this month and then one in March, if my memory is correct. And what is Hedron, guys? What can you do with it? I'm going to tell you what I think you can do with it, and then Alex can correct me about how wrong I am. But basically, guys, it's a way where, if liquid loans is a way for you to never really have to sell your Pulse, Hedron is kind of a way for you to never have to sell your HEX. There's three main functions that Hedron can do. One, you can mint HDRN tokens from your existing stakes. Two, you can borrow Hedron against the whole length of your full stake if you want to, but you have to pay interest on that and you have a liquidity risk. And three, you can also wrap your stake by creating a stake through the Hedron contract. And then that stake becomes tradable as an NFT with any NFT compatible marketplace. So three really cool things that I believe are going to drive stake participation through the roof when we get to PulseChain, because like I was just saying, why wouldn't everybody want to just start creating max length stakes if what you're essentially doing is creating a secondary market for these tradable stakes? And if people can also mint and borrow another token based on the value of the stakes, not only the number of HEX in the stake, but the length of days served in the stake. So I hope I got most of that right. But Alex, you want to introduce yourself and tell me if that was wrong?
Yeah, I think you got the gist pretty good. But yeah, I'm Alex. I'm the founder and creator of Hedron, and it's been a long year, kind of working in the shadows until it was ready for the public to know about. But yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of other people excited too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool idea. As with any new thing, especially that's not a Richard Hart product, there's obviously going to be skepticism and just a general sentiment of new thing bad. But really, I mean, what I like about this is that you made a point to stick to the ideals of HEX, which are no admin keys and get audited, obviously. And so it's a truly decentralized contract. I hope the audits come in and everything is good, and I hope you're able to fix any nuances that they might get, but that's why you get audited, right? I mean, they're expected to find bugs. That's what you're paying them for. So, while it may not be perfect now, it doesn't even exist yet. So you've got some time to, tweak it if you need to. And, just not financial advice, but I do believe the official launch phase is going in the form of a sacrifice, and it will be at the end of the month, January 31st, right?
There's actually no sacrifice.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, if you have a HEX stake, it's 100% free. You can just mint tokens. There's a 10x. There's up to a 10x launch bonus, and for 100 days. And if you have HEX stakes based on the shares in those stakes and how many days you've served, you could mint quite a significant amount. And that's kind of the whole idea. It's really a token distribution model where we are, we're saying, hey, these tokens need to exist. We need them in the wild for a lot of the processes to work within Hedron. And this model allows essentially the best HEX holders to be the ones who are going to be the best Hedron holders. Because I can't think of anyone else I'd rather hold my new token than the hexagons who've already approved they can hold HEX for over 2 years.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of diamond hands out there that are probably excited about this. There's also probably going to be a lot of people that just want to dump the hell out of Hedron. Because what basically Alex is saying is apparently there's no sacrifice, so I take that back. The DApp goes live on January 31st, and it just exists. And the way that they're doing their emission schedule is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Hedron is inflationary, but that inflation tapers off due to the deflationary aspect of T-shares. So because T-shares get more and more scarce as time goes on, and the amount of Hedron you can mint is based on the number of B shares that you own times the number of days in the stake that you've served. Well, as we know, as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to mint B shares because those become more scarce. So the number of people minting Hedron, or the number of Hedron minted, will become lower and lower over time. And the initial bonus phase for the initial launch period is, I think if you mint in the first 100 days, you get a 10x multiplier on day 1. That goes down by 0.1x on day 2, so on and so forth, until you increment by 100, and then you're down to just a 1x. Is that right?
We've actually changed this. So the community's been great in offering suggestions. So anything that seems, there's suggestions we can't do, but some of the things, or one of them anyway, has been that we've changed the launch bonus from being that 100x and then down per 1x per day. Now, 10x down by 1x per day. That's been changed to basically 10x for 10 days and then 9x for 10 days, 8x for 10 days. And that kind of lets everyone breathe a little and get in on the best gas day possible.
Yeah, cool. A little more flexibility. Yeah, one of my, I guess, confusion points about this is that, all right, basically, there's going to be a DApp that lets you mint Hedron. And if you have an existing stake, the number of Hedron you can mint is, again, your B shares times your days served. If you haven't created a stake yet, you can choose to wrap that stake through the Hedron contract, and that gives you the ability not only to mint, but to borrow or wrap as an NFT as well. So those additional 2 functions come only for new stakes, but let's call them legacy stakes. Legacy stakes can only mint Hedron. This is a cool way to extract some value out of your stake, but Hedron itself is not a stable coin, right? So it's just another coin, right? And it might be inflationary to a tapering off degree, kind of like Bitcoin, but like what gives it value? How does it, why do people want this?
So there's really 2 big things I think about with the Hedron token. So its entire mintability is tied to the share price, right? You kind of went over that already, where the share price increases, the overall mintability is going to decrease, and that's going to be fairly exponential. On the other side of this, on the borrowing side, when people are borrowing, you're going to have a little bit of deflation because the payments made back are burnt by the contract, and God forbid liquidations happen, but if they do happen, would take 90 days of no repayment for you to potentially be liquidated.
So hold on, are these repayments done in Hedron as well?
Yes.
So when you borrow the Hedron, you have to acquire more Hedron at like a 1% rate per day or something? Or
either that, like you could go to the secondary market and buy that, or if you have another stake that you mint, you could obtain it that way. There's a lot of variance there in how you do it, but yeah, if you're, it's not any different than any other loan. If you borrow US dollars, you pay back US dollars in most cases.
Yeah.
So the loan's going to natively be in the native token. But all
I guess that's where I'm getting hung up though, because like I'm just really accustomed to when I get a loan, it's in like a dollar denomination or USDC denomination or something, USDL. But this one is going to be in Hedron, and so
sure,
I guess that's fine. I mean,
so
go on.
The thing to think about here is what is the value of a HEX stake? Like, how would you put a number on a HEX stake?
Well, it's the time value of money, right? So it's based on the amount of gratification you're delaying. It's based on the opportunity cost that you're sacrificing, essentially.
Sure. So I mean, a lot of ways you could, if you want to go down the stable route, you can go down this idea where maybe the value of your HEX stake is the value of what the T shares cost today. But in most cases, it's more than that. I have stakes where I look at how many T shares it has and what the T share cost is today, and it's currently, if it ended today with the amount of interest I have, it would end worth more than what that was. And there's no way to predict in the future with HEX how much interest you're going to get per day, or what fees you're going to get if there's going to be emergency end stakes. So if you're trying to build something that's going to build a pseudo stable around a HEX stake as any kind of collateral, you're just going to get arbitraged constantly, because whatever calculation you're doing to try to valueize that stake, it's gonna be wrong one way or wrong the other way at some point, and people will just arbitrage it, and you're gonna end up with this constant negative feedback loop within the protocol. So with it not being a stable, you end up with a more interesting idea where the price of Hedron should track the actual share price. So like the price of a B share, what is that right now?
A B share?
Yeah, let me.
Well, T share is 20,000 hex. B share would be like 200 hex, I guess.
Yeah.
So 200 times 0.25, about 50 hex, or 50 cents. No, 50. Is that right?
It's about $5, I think. Last I looked.
Oh, off by 10. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, right idea. So let's just say it's 200 hex. That's a good one. So because Hedron's going to mint in this daily fashion, you really want to divide this 200 by the average stake length, which is what, 6 years? Probably.
Yep. About that.
And so we'll just divide, so 2,190, that's how many days in 6 years. Divide that by these keyboards. That's actually wrong. Okay. So 200 hex divided by 2,190. So you should see that like one Hedron's worth about 0.01 hex currently.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be somewhere around like 0.002 US dollars. If you're looking at a valuation of what it should be. This isn't necessarily an idea of what it will be worth because the market's going to figure that out. But if you're trying to like think of Hedron as a proxy to the T share, that's roughly what the valuation should be. So as the share price goes up, that number is going to increase, and the two pieces of the inflation and deflation, you have that inflationary aspect where we're tied to share price, and the deflationary aspect where we haven't even covered this part, so I'll have to back up for a second. But when you have a loan and you don't pay it back, there's normal consequences in the real world. In Hedron, if you borrow Hedron and you don't pay it back within 90 days, there's the potential that you get liquidated. That doesn't mean Hedron liquidates you. It means someone else using the protocol, so another user can liquidate you, and that will start a auction process.
Right. So
the end of that result is people are going to bid Hedron to the point to get that stake, and all that Hedron's burnt. So you have this inflation on one side, deflation on the other, and they should both meet around the share price. So is it inherently a stable, in its own right? No, it's not going to. It only seeks the price of the share price by user interaction, not by its own algorithmic use. But so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But most people tend to think of this as a more interesting thing to stables, because stables end up being a little boring. Like,
Okay. Yeah, that's true. I guess I have to think about this a little more, but so you're saying the price of Hedron will ideally track the share price of a B share, plus some kind of premium or deficit, basically, depending on how the market feels. That's interesting. I want to pull up the flow chart a little bit for people that might be new. If you don't mind, I've got it up right here. Guys, go read Hedron.pro if you actually want to get a basis of understanding. I might have came in a little too hot with like more technical stuff, but essentially going back to the basic premise, if anyone's lost or confused, this is what it looks like, right? So on the right-hand side, you could see the HEX native stake. That section in the blue is the flowchart for the HEX native stake. What a HEX native stake means is that you've already created a stake on HEX. You can also call it a legacy stake if you want or whatever, but you have a pre-existing HEX stake. The only thing you can do with Hedron for your pre-existing HEX stake is just mint Hedron tokens. And again, the number of Hedron tokens you can mint is the number of B shares that stake has times the number of days in your stake served out of the total. That's one thing you can do with your legacy stakes. But now if you're to create a new stake through the Hedron smart contract, audited, no middlemen, no admin keys. You can do three things, right? You can mint Hedron, again, in the same way as the legacy stakes. You can borrow Hedron. So because if you're starting a fresh stake, you won't have any days completed. What you can do is say, all right, go ahead and give me all the Hedron as if I've completed the whole stake. But that's going to be in the form of a loan that I have to pay back at a rate of, I think, 1% increase per month, is it?
It depends on what the HEX APY is. It's a factor of that. But I can tell you that if like the HEX APY is 40%, you're going to be looking at like a fixed 1.64% interest rate for the life of whatever you're borrowing.
Interesting. So still relatively low, compared to many loan terms out there. And finally, you can choose to wrap this stake too. Any stake minted through the Hedron contract is denoted here as an HSI, a HEX stake instance. So that it's almost just like a wrap stake, right? I mean, that's essentially what it is. And so the third thing, other than minting and borrowing, is you can tokenize your stake and have it be tradable as an NFT in the ERC format. I don't know, I forgot the number. ERC
721.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You could trade those on any platform that's compatible, such as like Rarible or OpenSea. One thing that people like myself are often wary of is, having to give the contract permissions to mess with your wallet, especially if you got some valuable stakes. I understand that for the minting process, the only thing you have to give access to, the only thing that your MetaMask cares about is a read-only access, just like you do on many different websites, on go to hex.com and all that. That's for minting. But and you might have to sign a signature. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to sign the transaction when you mint.
Okay. And so signing a transaction, guys, is also very low risk. I mean, that's what you guys do in Matcha or 1inch. If you want to set a limit order, signing a transaction is just proving that you own the private keys. It doesn't do anything. So that's also very low risk. However, I believe there is like an allowance that you have to grant if you want to start a HEX stake instance. And that's where I always feel like a little scared. So can you help me not feel so scared about that?
Yeah. So the thing to think about here is that the HEX stake instance is kind of like, I like to tell people it's a jar. People make fun of me for saying that, but think of it, it's a jar, it's a container, and you're going to throw some HEX in it, and it's pre-programmed to start a stake. And then at the end of the stake, when it's over, or early end stake if you're going to do that, I'd never recommend it, but either way, you can tell the jar to end stake. When you do that, the jar breaks itself, and then you can grab the HEX out of it, right? That's kind of
if you earn any HEX, unless you totally
yeah,
nuke
sure,
yourself.
yeah. If you emerge the end stake, there may not be anything in there. So this container, because it has to start the stake for you, right? HEX believes this container is the actual staker itself. It has its own address. It doesn't have any keys, but it does have its own address.
Interesting.
So you're in this situation where you've got to tell the HEX contract that this container is allowed to spend your HEX. It's allowed to make the stake. So there's an approval there when you're creating these stakes. And you can set that amount to, by default, it's set to exactly however much you're staking. So it can't take more than that. Some people will not like that because that's a transaction. It's 2 transactions you have to do every time you want to stake. So it'll be an approval, then a stake. So there's the option there to approve unlimited, which is what like Matcha or 1inch will do. So you never have to do it again. So whichever you're more inclined to do is your choice. But
so you can either approve the exact amount that you're about to stake, or you can approve unlimited, and that will basically approve you for all future HEX HSIs in the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really a choice. The more security conscious will choose to not approve unlimited, but we do have a GitHub where the code's on. If you want to see what it's going to do with your HEX, it's right there. It's only 3 things it can do: start a stake, end a stake, or good accounting.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, because I mean, every time you're doing an approval, you should be very, very wary of what contract you're approving to allow to spend your HEX, right? I mean, there's so many evil contracts out there with admin keys and all that. If you don't believe Alex, yeah, like he said, go read the code. There's no admin keys in this thing, so I don't think there's anything you could possibly even do. Are there any secret switches or just minor admin functionality that you might have?
Nope.
Or that somebody might have?
Absolutely zero. The only things that exist are there are two addresses, and if you're familiar with the HEX OA and the flush address from back when they had the adoption amplifier,
Yeah.
those kind of exist in Hedron. There's a source address and a flow address. The source address gets a copy of all the bonuses, similar to what the OA does. And the flow address gets a copy of NFT royalties if they are present. And that's an address that unfortunately has to exist because NFT marketplaces, some will not list you if you don't have your contract created in a special way.
I see. So the basic, the route to monetization for whoever might own these addresses is basically just royalties from NFTs.
I have to say, like, don't expect any profit from the work of others.
Yes.
I don't know what these addresses may or may not do with this, but yeah, you could view it that way.
Cool. And I assume I could make up whatever nice story in my head I want to about what the SA might or might not do, but I would assume, that it would want some coins for liquidity providing and potentially exchange listing. I don't know, whatever opportunities pop up, you want somebody with high incentives to be aligned with the success of Hedron itself. So yeah, I think this is cool. Like BG said, it's an innovation for sure. It's an improvement. It's an add-on to HEX. Let's see, I had a point or a concern troll thing to say, but I forgot it. I like it. I like it a lot. And oh yeah, so this is a legitimate thought. A lot of people with their legacy shares, I mean, they've got T shares upon T shares, and your Hedron is minted based on B shares. So already the people that had the ability to mint many T shares have 1,000x leverage on new stakes, versus new stakes. They have 1,000x more than anybody getting B shares today. They're also going to get 10x, so they're maybe going to get 10,000x if they choose to mint early in the life cycle of the launch. And a lot of people are going to be minting a lot of free Hedron, basically. So whereas people that understand the system might choose to hold due to the value of Hedron, I think it's reasonable to assume a lot of people are just going to dump the crap out of this for like a month or two at least. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's totally possible. This is why I tell people, like, a lot of people ask, well, should I start borrowing like as soon as this launches? And my gut reaction is to tell people, no, don't. I would not touch that button until we have kind of a more stable price discovery point.
Right.
But additionally, on the other side of that, I think dumping might not be as severe as we think it will. It's so hard to say, right? Because people can do whatever they're gonna do.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of incentive, especially early on when the price is low, to hold. And I think the most enticing thing is the idea that they might be able to buy some stakes out of liquidations if they exist. So, if you're someone who's minting millions of Hedron and Hedron's worth significantly less than $1, like 0.00000 something maybe. I don't know what it'll be, but and you could take millions or billions of that and potentially buy a stake with it. You probably would. You probably would hold on to it, in my estimation.
That is like a layer, like a more woke move, I suppose. You could just wait there for all these people to default on their loans, and you could essentially take advantage of people not understanding the system. But that said, I do think you're giving out a lot of free coins in the beginning. And I want to warn everybody here, like, I know a lot of you guys are going to get your free Hedron and the first thing you're going to think is, where can I dump this? I'm looking at you, Avalon. And no, I'm just kidding, man. But that's the thought process that a lot of people have. And so it might not be totally absurd to see, obviously, when any new thing launches, you're going to see volatility. But if you're looking to buy Hedron on the open market, buy the dip is my non-financial advice. But if you're looking to actually take advantage of the system, this is gonna, by getting a token that you can mint that backs the value of your shares, I think this is going to incentivize tons of people to start stakes. And like I said earlier, why wouldn't they just want to start max length stakes and borrow against them? Or I mean, even though there is risk, there's always risk to borrowing. But I think you're going to see a lot more incentive for people to start stakes, especially when this hits PulseChain. And that's another thing I want to clarify. So right now, this is going to launch on Ethereum, and then it'll be forked to PulseChain automatically.
Yes.
Okay, so there will be Hedron and PulseChain Hedron.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how do you think that's going to work out?
So I know there are people so there's about 1,300 people in Hedron Telegram right now, which to me is pretty amazing because I've only been talking about this for like maybe 3 weeks at this point. So to me, that's great. But of those people, a vast majority of them want to provide liquidity. Like they're going to be in a really interesting position because they're going to have so much of this stuff that they're like, I want to take advantage of liquidity. I want to, all the people that dump, I want their coins. So it's great. But what it seems to be their their strategy is to create an Ethereum Hedron pair in the beginning, like really make that the major pair, so that once
I see.
Once the Pulse market bot comes in, it's going to copy that more or less, going to buy it all, throw it in PulseX, and should that all go as they think it will, it would have a permanent liquidity floor on PulseX day one. So there we're not going to need another price discovery. You would already have a pretty good peg to go in and start the Hedron Hedron pair.
Wow, that's very cool. Yeah, that's a very I don't think a lot of people realize that. For if you have a product that you want to launch now, it probably makes sense to launch now rather than just wait if it's ready, right? If it's ready, because you can take advantage of these liquidity conditions and you can kind of foster the right liquidity environments, because all that Hedron ETH pair is going to be converted to a Hedron Pulse pair, and it's also going to run the liquidity bot through it, and you're going to have some kind of a stable, semi-stable pair from day one on PulseChain for Hedron PLS. And then when everyone gets their copies, you can go ahead and back the value of the Hedron and Hedron pair.
Well, the interesting thing to think about is, like, as for why it launches on ETH and then gets copied to Pulse, is one of the most fragile times for a new project is going to be the first couple months, right? And by making you have to use Ethereum, like you're going to pay more in gas. Like if you pay pennies in gas to get billions of free tokens, your personal valuation of those free tokens, if you are of the dumping attitude, is much lower. You don't care what you dump those for. But if you have to pay maybe $20, $30 in a gas fee, you might care slightly more. So you kind of have a bottom price that you will dump them for.
Right, and that'll keep out a lot of smaller dumpers too. However, there's still going to be a gas fee associated with the bridge, so it's going to be a matter of, I wonder how much those bridge fees are going to cost.
Yeah, that'll be fun to see when that comes out.
I hope it's gas efficient because we want the one-way diode. We want people coming into PulseChain and then never ever leaving. So that goes for the HEX HEX pair, this new Hedron Hedron pair. We want it to be more attractive for them to bridge in and back their value than just to sell. And if you have like $1,000 or less, for example, and if you're like a smaller holder, let's say, and it costs you $200 to cash out, and it costs you $20 to bridge and back the value and earn liquidity fees and an incentive reward token and all that. Choice is obvious.
It makes less sense for sure. But the thing I find interesting about Hedron, this is a kind of a metric Bree ran, with a famous spreadsheet. But so in Hedron, there's the possibility, if not enough people claim, it's like if 5% or less of hexagons, because obviously not all of them are going to do it. That's impossible. But of all the people who have stakes, if 5% or less of them actually go in and mint during those first 100 days, that difference, because some of these people will be able to get 10x, could potentially, like in terms of Hedron, allow you to jump to the next level of staker class. So like if you're a squid in HEX, and by default a squid in Hedron, you could more or less become a dolphin in Hedron, which is super
Oh,
interesting
Hedron
to
is going
think
to have
about.
ranks?
It not officially, but I'm just saying, like if you're looking at like how many shares one Hedron is tied to, if less people are claiming, you end up with those shares being like more centralized to a smaller group of people, to where that bonus you get for claiming kind of like pushes the ranking the other direction. Like you could climb the ladder a little to a degree. It's just an interesting idea to think about, really. She's got a spreadsheet on Twitter.
Cool.
Lots
Yeah,
of
I'll check that
spreadsheets.
out. I'll check that out. It's probably in the Telegram too, right?
Yeah, it's all over.
Okay.
All over the Telegram.
Yeah, I've done about maybe 2 hours of research, so there's definitely a lot more I can do. What is the loan to mint ratio? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so for accuracy, that's going to be renamed to the advanced to mint ratio. We're kind of taking the stance of that terminology should be more like an advance. Like if you think about how borrowing is working in Hedron, whereas in minting you have to actually serve the days in order to get them. In borrowing, you don't have to serve the days. You can just get them all up front. But there's still days you could, in theory, serve. So you're really getting an advance on what you would have been able to mint if you waited. So we're kind of going with that terminology now. But that ratio it's kind of a failsafe. So there's a potential here where if, let's say, everybody borrows and nobody mints, well, now everyone's got premiums to pay back. And the only place you're going to get those premiums is from somebody else borrowed. The big nested problem where everyone will get liquidated eventually. So
That's a good point.
that bonus exists to incentivize minting. So if you have the total supply, and let's say the borrowed percentage is 50% of that total supply, anything over that will trigger a bonus to minting.
I see. But now, over time, won't this trend to dip below 50%? So what I'm saying, let me word that better. The loan to mint ratio is basically how many Hedron are minted versus how many Hedron are loaned. The catastrophic environment would be if nobody minted and everybody loaned. Well, they've got to make interest payments and they can't get any new Hedron unless it's minted. So nobody can pay these payments back if we're in some crazy world where everyone is just borrowing. There's no way to get new Hedron to pay off all these loans and everybody defaults. So originally we're going to have this assumed to have a very high level of minting. But after the legacy HEX stakers all mint, right, it's going to become harder and harder to mint. And like you even mentioned on the website, minting slows down to a degree over time. Like the inflation of the coin reaches an asymptote because shares are always getting more expensive. New stakes that are starting can only mint as time goes on. Won't we reach an environment one day where people are borrowing at a lot higher rate than new Hedrons being minted, and won't that cause some problems?
Well, it'll depend, because that ratio is going to depend on, because there's going to be a lot of old Hedron that still exists too, right? Probably trillions of it that will come out in this first year, 2-year cycle. So there'll be a lot of old Hedron, and that counts. And as long as it's not burnt, it counts towards this ratio. So, and additionally, as people are borrowing in the future, like they're borrowing against what is future mintable. So if you're borrowing against a stake that's started 2 or 3 years from now, it's also not borrowing as much as it minted. So it's going to be this interesting duality thing where really it's going to be like these older stakes being potentially borrowed against that are kind of outclassing the newer stakes. But the thing I find, I guess, the most interesting about it is when it comes to minting, like we talked a little bit about the potential for there being dumping in day one. One of the strategies people have is to actually not mint at all. Is to, because there's a claim button as well, which will claim your bonus but not actually give you any tokens. And that's mostly just for tax purposes. So if someone starts the pool at $30, you don't get a billion tokens that valued at $30 each as a
Oh,
taxable
cool.
event.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause that would be bad.
Yeah.
So
That's very cool.
So a lot of people intend to claim and not mint, because if they're not minting, they're not like contributing to this AMR thing, right? So if they don't mint for however long the stakes are and people are borrowing, it's more likely to trigger AMR. And if that bonus does occur, it compounds with their launch bonus they already claimed. So I think it was calculated out that if like 55% of Hedron got borrowed, you could effectively double your launch bonus. So a lot of people are now sitting here talking about, okay, well, I'm not going to mint, at least until I have to, the last day of my stake, just in the hopes that this AMR might trigger, because I could effectively just immediately double my stack on that day. So
Cool.
there's going to be some like interesting plays. Like everyone's got different game theory, but not minting is one of them.
So you make it attractive for people to mint if we're seeing more than 50% of people are borrowing, then all of a sudden this bonus kicks in and says, hey, if you mint now, we'll give you even more.
Yeah.
Because we need to help offset some of these people that are going to default on their loans. I don't know. I see that as the only risk here, is that if that ratio goes haywire, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the ratio goes haywire, like I say, worst case, like it's 100% borrowed, the contract's going to come to you as a minter and say, hey, I will give you 100x of whatever you commit right now to mint. And that's going to be pretty attractive, you know.
Right. But yeah, but you are still hoping on that there will
Sure.
always be a minter, right? So
well, and there's always the possibility that you know, no expectations of profit from the work of others, but there's the possibility maybe the SA steps in.
Yeah.
If need be.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, those two things can help me sleep at night a little bit. But let's see. I want to also talk about loan liquidations, right? So let's say someone else takes out a loan. They have to pay it, and they can't be more than 90 days late on their payment, right? They have to pay it in more Hedron.
Yes.
And it's about 1.6% per month, I think. And if they can't pay it and they default on their loan, me as a random Hedron holder or user can go ahead and use my Hedron that I minted to go ahead and buy up and buy out this guy's entire loan. In return, I get his stake that he essentially used as collateral.
Yeah. So that's what'll happen is you're gonna go in there, you're gonna look at the list of liquidatable stakes, and you find one you like, and you're gonna essentially start a 24-hour auction for that. So whoever starts it, like at the moment that it has started, that person loses control of their stake. They keep whatever they borrowed. You know, it's not going to make them give their tokens back anymore. But that stake will go out of their control, and it gets held at the zero addresses for like a temporary location where no one can control it. And during that 24-hour period, people are just bidding amounts of Hedron up to the point. If you're like within the last 5 minutes, it'll add 5 minutes to the timer just to combat bots coming in at the last minute and sniping all the liquidations. So, but anyway, there'll be a highest bidder there, and then whoever that highest bidder is going to have their Hedron burnt, and then they'll get the stake.
Cool. So you're further reducing the supply of Hedron, but you're getting the stake. Yeah. So all of this in Hedron is with the hope of benefiting the HEX and ecosystem.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think of it, if you want to get into some like game theory stuff, the thing to think about is like why do people emerge the stake? If you had to
either they were hacked, they don't know what they're doing, or they have some terrible thing happen.
Yeah. So this solves the terrible thing case. I mean, it's probably not going to solve the hacked case. It might, but I don't think so. The reason it might solve the hacked case is because if you get hacked, you could, in theory, try to beat the hacker and tokenize your stakes and get them off to a different address, versus currently you would have to sit there and watch them EES all your stuff. Nothing you can do about it.
Wait, can you retroactively tokenize your stake though? Like, what if you get hacked and all your stakes are done not through Hedron?
Yeah, well, if they're not through Hedron, you wouldn't be able to do that.
You're screwed.
But
Okay.
but if you did them through Hedron and they were just sitting there and you weren't doing anything with them, you could just tokenize them and send them off.
So there's almost a security benefit here, depending on how you look at it. Obviously, you should never give away your private keys, but if someone by chance got a hold of them, you would hope that stake is tradable, so you can just trade it to yourself. And
yeah, hopefully you can beat the hacker to that, right? It'd be a little bit of a race.
Right. Well, it would also be unlikely that the hacker would be able to figure out what to do exactly right away.
Yeah, especially in the early days where no one really knows about Hedron, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, cool. I mean, there's aspects to that. There's aspects to kind of like in game theory ways, like trying to wrap this together. But like one thing people don't think about with like tradable stakes, right, is you have less dumpability of the hex price overall. Because someone who's going to EES is someone who's going to put a price on their stake. Basically, they're willing to say, hey, my stake's worth this much now. Yeah, cool. I'll take that. That looks good to me. And then they're going to immediately dump that. Versus with this, they can do the same thing, except now someone who wants to hold it can have the stake.
This is one of the pieces of the puzzle that we've been talking about for years now. I remember back in the first couple of months of HEX when we were talking about, like, me and Dollar Cost Crypto were like, oh, one day there's going to be a secondary market and it's going to be like a bond market and people are going to be trading stakes. This is it. It's coming to life right now. And it's perfect timing with PulseChain too. So that's awesome. And yeah, essentially what you're saying is it prevents dumpability or it makes HEX less likely to dump, because rather than dump your whole stake, you could trade your stake away and you provide basically another level of game theory, another component that makes it even more sticky. So people are trading all these stakes that are max length. People are incentivized to stake more and for longer, and they don't actually have to sell their HEX. Yeah.
Well, and if you want to like kind of like big picture this, right? The minting state moves with it. So you're making this HSI stake and it's going to have some mintability. You'll be able to mint some Hedron to it. Let's say you never do it. You just never click the mint button and then you sell the stake. Well, all that unminted Hedron just moves with the stake when you sell it to the next guy.
Oh, I hadn't even considered that. That's cool.
So now you have a premium driver on the secondary market. Say, hey, not only are you getting this, now you're getting all this other stuff too.
Wow.
So you get this. That's like one piece that's really interesting to me. The other piece is, like, if you look at the minting and borrowing games entirely and what they bring to the staker class, you have this super awesome duality where it's like, okay, we're dumping less because there's less EES, and I can demand premiums for these things because I can include all this unminted stuff. So they're going to go for a significant amount of money. Then on the other side, everyone wants to buy and stake HEX because they want to be able to borrow. They want to be able to participate in liquidations. And the most effective way of getting there is to make stakes. Like, sure, I can go buy Hedron on the open market, and some people choose to do that. But some people will say, well, if I can have two things and get one of them for free, that makes more sense to me. So I'm seeing a thing where you have increased buy pressure and decreased sell pressure in HEX.
That's awesome. And this is going to be one of the first examples of more of a financial NFT, right? We're finally not just selling thick Pokemon anymore. Although I do love thick Pikachu, special place in my heart for him. But
pretty good.
Financial NFTs are different, and it's going to take. This is the first real use case I've seen of that.
Yeah, there are a couple, like Uniswap V3's LP token is an NFT, so you can actually trade those, like your positions in Uniswap V3.
Wow.
But that's kind of like not as many people know about that. But yeah, like these are going to be HEX stakes. Like you're going to go to OpenSea, and hopefully they don't. OpenSea has a history of banning people, so we'll see how that goes. But
really?
Rarible at least. Yeah, it'll at least be Rarible. You'll be able to take these there, and it's just going to be a sea of HEX logos. Like, it's going to be the best marketing ever. Yeah, just all over these marketplaces. People are going to have no idea why these things are going for, like, I don't know, $500,000, $1 million. I don't know what they'll actually go for, but it's just going to be crazy to see.
Yeah, you get these degens into something more wholesome and good. Especially like, hey man, sell your monkey, buy something that actually lasts. or that's actually going to survive the next bear market, you know?
Yeah.
My last real thing, I think I asked this already, but I was wondering if you could try to explain it one more time, because it hasn't really sunk in yet. But why is the Hedron price predicted to track the share price?
Well, it's just because it's a matter of the way it inflates against the share price, and then also deflates against it. Like, so you understand how the inflation works. I think that's the most straightforward part.
Yes.
The deflation is like, what are you going to pay in Hedron tokens? Like, if these things are a proxy, more or less, to your shares, like, how many of them do you pay to buy a stake? Probably about as much as it costs to buy the shares for that stake. Those two values probably balance out. So now people could choose to bid more than that, right? But if they do, all they're really going to be doing is like trying to use deflation and inflation to like narrow the price in between down on that share price chart line. So it's not algorithmically tied to it, but just user interaction in general will help ensure it gets closer to it over time.
Great. Okay. So because in liquidation events, you'd want to price the share at some price. The best way to price a stake in some price. The best way to realize the value of that stake is just to say how much do these T shares cost today, or these B shares cost today,
exactly.
And then pay the appropriate amount of Hedron for that.
That would be the fair value, right? So I don't know what people actually pay. Could be vastly more than that, but
yeah. Well, awesome. Like, this is really cool stuff, man. I want to just leave the floor to you if there's any points that we missed. I can't think of any more questions right now, other than I'm super excited, and this is really, really cool. Anything you want to talk about? Tell people about?
I think, yeah, let's talk about borrowing for a second, because I think this is like one of these things where like everyone's scared of it. Everyone's very scared of borrowing. I mean,
I am.
If I was thinking about any other crypto platform that I did not build, I would be scared of borrowing.
Yeah,
like they almost all wreck people. Like I think Liquid Loans has a good model too, but it seems like they're not going to wreck people. But the interesting about this model is the way Hedron's doing it is like, not only is the interest low, right? It's basically like whatever half of the HEX APY divided by 12 is roughly what it would be. So it's very low. My HEX stakes that are in there are going to appreciate way more than the cost of any Hedron loan is going to cost me. I can also mint like on other stakes. So it's like, worst case scenario, you're borrowing on one side, and if the price of Hedron moves way against you, and you're like, I don't want to have to buy that back, and you have another stake, you could just mint and pay back using a secondary stake. So I see like lots of use cases, and it's mostly like tax beneficial. Like, I think that's probably the biggest thing where you can imagine being able to like effectively pay. This is not tax advice, by the way. I am not a tax advisor, but I've referenced a few in all of this, and I just imagine a way where you might be able to pay the taxes for your HEX stakes for the year in a Hedron borrow, and then just slowly mint back over time, deferring taxes further. Just keep pushing. Like, that's really the most useful thing for borrowing in my eyes is, there's going to be liquidity you need, whether it be for taxes or maybe you have some bad life event. Like, someone had messaged me earlier, I think it was last week, but I said I had to emergency end-stake and liquidate all my HEX because I got diagnosed with cancer. And it's like, man, if Hedron would have existed, maybe you could mint, maybe you could borrow, and try to avoid those things. And and that they said that's why they were in our chat rooms, because this is exciting and they want to get back into this stuff, and and they want to see this exist, and a lot of people want to see it exist. So I think with anything there's risk. Borrowing, you can get liquidated in borrowing, but I think it's important to also note that there's a lot of ways to also not get liquidated.
Okay. Yeah. So you can basically defer taxes indefinitely as long as you have claimed Hedron or unminted Hedron that are just ready to go, because you can always use that mint function to then pay it off.
Yeah.
Or to that you could basically cash out your Hedron right away and then mint later, is what you're saying? Like, I
Yeah,
just
more or
think that,
less.
like, yeah, this goes into the weirdness of it's not a stable coin that you're borrowing. You're borrowing like another token, which is almost like, I know you're not a tax advisor, neither am I, but did anybody ever tell you that, is it different if it's not a stable coin that's dollar based, or is your loan value based on the USD price of the Hedron that you borrow at the time?
It's what it is at the time. So this is where like you run into the potential downside of if you borrow this and it's worth so much USD and the price goes up and then you have to pay it back. Well, now you're paying back more USD value than what you borrowed because your payments are like at a point in time where Hedron's worth more. So that's actually a capital loss. Like, this is really not a lot different. Like, you can think of the model as similar to the structure of how, like, it's not necessarily margin trading, but it's kind of the same tax structure of margin trading where you get some stuff, you do some things with it, and you think the market's going to go up or down, so you try to game that, and then hopefully have a capital loss or a gain on the other side. You can do the kind of same things here with this, but the kind of outlier is the mintability, right? Because it's like if you get into a pickle, you can always have the second stake minted to help get you by through those times, and that's like the safest play in my book.
Yeah, and that's if you want to borrow. Borrowing still scares me, but
it should. It should. If you don't feel comfortable with borrowing, don't click the button. It is optional, and I know there's a lot of people intend to do it. A lot of people tend to do it to provide liquidity. That scares me. But,
oh no.
Well, there's a strategy you can do. I won't go into it here because if people try to do it, it's advanced and they'll get wrecked. But there actually is a strategy for it.
Cool. Well, I'm interested in hearing about that in maybe the Telegram channel or something.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's more layers to this onion. But we're coming up on an hour right now, and this is probably one of those streams that people might have to watch 1 or 2 times in a row. I'm probably actually going to rewatch my own stream for once just to try to pick up and fully understand all this stuff. But it's awesome. It's got my interests. This and liquid loans. I'm not a financial advisor, guys. If you want to buy this, go buy it. I'm not telling you to buy it. I'm not telling you to mint or not. I'm just telling you guys what it is. So any last thoughts or topics you want to talk about?
I think I've basically touched on all the main stuff. If you want, we might be able to ask chat questions if you don't mind. Maybe someone something interesting.
Let's do that. Hex Mix says that felt like 5 minutes. I know that's how you know it's a good combo is when the time literally flies by. Like, I was looking up at the timer. I'm like 52 minutes. Damn. We got let's do 8 minutes for questions. So Bueller. Let's scroll up a little bit.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's some in the history.
Yeah. It's on both chains. Yes, it will be on Ethereum first, and then it will be copied when PulseChain actually exists. That was an easy one.
Yep.
John May says, anyone see my questions? I don't. Can you ask it again, John May? Oh, bullish AF with this project. Is there going to be a sacrifice phase? Okay, I think we answered this already. No sacrifice phase, just an initial launch day where the DApp opens and you could just start minting. Crypto Cliff Nut says, please explain in a nutshell. Dude, come on. Okay, listen, how about this?
Right. The ELI 5 is you can mint free stuff, borrow it if you're comfortable with it, and you can trade your stakes.
Yep. Mint, borrow, and trade HEX stakes. Don't sell HEX. Increase HEX stakers. Number go up. When is it launching?
January 31st is the date currently. The only thing that'll push that back is the audit.
Cool. I think we answered this one already, but you want to?
Yeah, it's 100 days long. So, and then every 10 days it'll go down by 1x. So 10x down to 0 over 100 days.
Yeah, it's the bonus phase for people listening. Is this for new stakes only? So the mint and trade function, the convert to NFT and trade or borrow against your stake, those two functions are for new stakes. The mint is for old stakes and new stakes.
Yeah, as long as the stake still exists, like it hasn't been, you haven't clicked the end stake button, you can do it. You can mint.
Can you talk about potential added security? We talked about the beating the hacker type of thing.
Yeah.
Are there any other security things?
So here's like the interesting thought is, because we've kind of been running through in Telegram about like what that could be, but if you have hex stakes through Hedron, right, and they're not tokenized, so you haven't turned them into NFTs, absolutely nothing is going to show up in your Etherscan, right? Just going to show a contract interaction with Hedron, but if you try to like go to like any of these staking websites, none of them are going to show that you have a stake, because it's not technically like you have control of a stake, but it's the HSI contract address that actually has it. So unless those websites all go and update their programming to pull from Hedron, which might happen at some point, yeah, it's going to look like you have nothing, and that may be beneficial.
Cool. Slightly more privacy. On the other end of the spectrum, guys, I'm sorry to play devil's advocate, but there's always additional smart contract risk. You're adding another contract into things. It's going to be audited twice. It's going to be admin key free, but 0.0 whatever. There's some chance that it's not perfect. What rate of security will be needed to take a loan? For example, $100,000 hex stake. What could one borrow against it?
Well, it's going to depend on the price of Hedron, first of all. So if the price of Hedron is really low, you may not want to borrow in the first place, because it may not be worth it to you. But you're going to get basically how many B shares your stake has times the stake length. So if you have 100 B shares and it's a Quattro Cinco, you'll get 555,000 Hedron, whatever that happens to be worth.
Cool. So yeah, so it's always based on your shares times days. And the price of Hedron.
Yeah.
Right. Shares times days equals the number of Hedron you'll get, and then the market decides what that's worth, which will maybe trend towards the actual share price itself.
That's the goal.
Yes. All right. Yeah, Hedron, this is a good thing to clarify. Hedron cannot steal your stakes. Again, there's no admin keys, so there's but for legacy stakes. Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say what you were about to say. Yeah, for legacy stakes, it's literally impossible. Hedron would need your seed, like your seed phrase, to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's not halal, says Runeskies. It's probably due to like the loan factor. I don't know too much about this, but
it depends on how you want to view it. But the phrasing is all about premiums and advances. It's not necessarily a loan to advance. It's not necessarily interest in premium, but however you want to view it is up to you.
Cool. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Mint phase day 1 will get me all the stakes times T-shares. Staked days. Yes, days stake times.
So it'll give you all. Minting day 1 will give you all of the days you've served. Then tomorrow will be a new day, and that'll be a new day you've served. And you don't have to mint that day. You could wait 10 more days in mint, or wait 100 more days in mint, just as long as the stake actually will last that long.
Yeah. And it's times B shares, not T shares. So every T share is 1,000 B shares. And the first 100 days have a bonus multiplier of up to 10x. Let's see. All right. We're at an hour, guys. It's really awesome to see all you guys in here. Thanks for coming. Check out the Telegram. Check out Alex from Hedron. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
No problem.
You want to show your links and stuff, and then we'll head off?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Hedron Crypto, and then t.me/Hedron Crypto for the Telegram. Always got hexagons in there, voice chat, almost 24/7. So it's like a little party all the time.
Good stuff. All right, thanks guys. Talk to you on the next one.